Hey guys, what is going on? It's Preston here from the Legendarium. Welcome to episode 16 of 30-minute author interviews with our guest, Australian author S. Elliot Brandis. He does have a giveaway associated with this interview. Listen for what Major League Baseball team he saw when he came to America. Head on over to legendarium.com, find this episode, and in the show notes, leave a comment with your answer. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Thank you for joining us today, S. Elliot Brandis.
Hello, sir.
How are things going in Australia?
Good. Nice, beautiful day.
That is good. For those that don't know anything about you, why don't you kind of tell them who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Elliot. I've been writing now for, I think, a little over 2 years as a publishing writer. So I started out writing a few short stories, all different kinds of genres and topics. And then I just bit the bullet, wrote my first book, Irradiated, which is a post-apocalyptic book set in my hometown of Brisbane, Australia. And from there, it just grew and grew. So I've jumped between the map. I've written young adult. I've just released my first horror novel. And I don't really think I'll slow down anytime soon.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm sure your fans will like that one. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw in one of our first listener questions. It comes from, I believe you know him, Ernie Howard.
Yep.
He has the all-important question, do the toilets really swirl the other way down there?
They don't really swirl down here. So I've been to America a couple of times, and the little things like your toilets over there are different to our toilets over there, and the way the mechanism in which they flush is different, and it really throws you out. So ours are just sort of a gargle and it's gone, whereas over there you've got ones that kind of fill up and then start swirling. You got ones that evacuate like you're on a plane. It's like the full gamut of flushage. So I can't really say whether they swirl. I don't think it's true that water swirls different ways. The Coriolis effect, I don't think it's true.
That's right. We asked the all-important questions here. How are your toilets? Drew A. Avera would like to know, what does the S stand for in your name? Does it stand for hope like on Krypton?
It does indeed. It actually, so my given first name is Stephen, so it stands for Stephen, which is a little bit more boring than Elliot, which isn't that more exciting, but I don't know. I went to school and Stephen was a very common name over here at the time. So I kind of just made the switch to my middle name, which is the same as what my granddad did and my uncle, so it had precedence in my family.
Well, a few years ago, well, not a few years, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, I actually got into soccer, and I would go to where we lived, there was a shop that sold a bunch of soccer and rugby gear. And he introduced me to a sport that I'm curious if you watch. Do you watch Aussie rules football?
I do. It's my favorite.
I love that sport. I wish that was popular over here because it's so fun to watch. For those that haven't watched it, you have to go to YouTube and search Aussie rules football. It is unreal. I love watching that.
It's good. You have to, if you're ever over here, you have to go to a game. It's chaotic.
It looks like it. It really does.
The thing that gets me about American football, it's very stop-start. So you have to play, everyone will reset, change the players out, have a play. Whereas Aussie rules football, you're on a cricket oval, so it's about 200 meters long and an oval in shape. You have 18 players on each team running around, and it's just men chasing a ball flying around for 2 hours straight, and then that's the game.
I love how they start the game with the two players that go to the center, and then the ref just slams the ball down, and they just jump into each other, kicking, trying to get the ball. And then if it goes outside the circle, the ref on the side just turns his back to the field and just throws it. It's so fun. So as you mentioned, you write in several different genres. You've got thriller, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, dystopian. Is there one that you enjoy writing in the most?
I found I really enjoy writing horror, and that there's no real boundaries. Whereas a lot of genres you write, if I write science fiction, it's not science fiction. It's kind of my take on it. And readers of science fiction, and same as readers of romance, they have a set idea of what they expect from a story. And if they don't get that, if you throw out a couple of curveballs, it's a little bit more noticeable. And I write across genres, but I never really write to genre. I'm not a genre writer. I just write what I find interesting. So horror, you've got a bit more leeway, and people like it when you throw them curveballs and when you mix it up completely and play with the rules and break the rules. So I found it like a really fun sandbox to play around in.
So you said that your sci-fi isn't the type of sci-fi we might think of when we think of sci-fi. So what separates your version of sci-fi from what people might think of sci-fi?
Well, I tend to mix in elements of fantasy and elements of horror into my sci-fi. So to me, when I write a dystopian story, people think dystopian is very science fiction, but I like to mix in all sorts of weird kind of magical realism and bits and pieces that just kind of, the people who like it, they love it, and it's unlike anything they've read before. But if you go in expecting, your end of the world sci-fi and people creating bombs and this and that, it just doesn't have that, I guess, the really scientific element to it. Which just because it doesn't interest me. What interests me is the characters and how they react to events and the horrible ordeals that they go through. So I tend to write very character-focused stories rather than focusing on, say, a scientific principle and just nutting out the details of that. To me, whether a ship, how the faster the light drive works on the ship isn't an interesting part of the story in the way that my mind works. I'm more interested about the person who created it and why.
Gotcha. And in your bio, it says that you like to write stories that are about outlaws, outcasts, and outsiders. What is it about writing that type of story that appeals to you? It's just I find characters interesting, and I like flawed characters. So I like characters that you want to root for, but unashamedly have aspects about their personality that are that are either troubling or flawed or a little bit broken. And I think taking an outcast, taking someone that's outside the system, and they want to become a hero in their own way, but because it's them against the world, you've automatically got the chips are down, and you've got that conflict and that tension right from the get-go. And what is it that made you decide to kind of go after a writing career? What was it that influenced you?
It was always one of those things that I wanted to do, but life always gets in the way, because a lot of people like to say, "Oh, I'd like to be a writer. I've got a novel in my mind." But until you actually sit down day after day and chase it, like it's a big time commitment, and it's a big just mental commitment. So I just reached that point where I said, okay, I'm going to give it a go this year. I started going along to a writers group, meeting other writers, working on my stories, putting them out there for other writers to review and critique. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And it got to a point where I thought, I think I can do this. I can write my first novel. And so I sat down, punched it out, and didn't look back.
And that first novel was the first book you said in the Tunnel trilogy, correct?
That's correct.
Why don't you tell people, kind of give them the little book blurb on what your Tunnel trilogy is about?
So it's post-apocalyptic, but it's kind of post-apocalyptic. So it's about a world where people don't remember the old world. They don't remember what happened. They don't remember what destroyed civilization. All they care about is how they're going to survive day on day. So it's about a woman called Jade and her sister who grew up in an underground road tunnel, which is sort of where society's retreated underground because the environment outside is so harsh. But like all great evil civilizations have grown very controlling and very, this is the way we do things now, and you're not allowed to go outside and this and that. And they're very harsh on people that are born different to them. So people with mutations from the intense environment. So anyone that's got exposure to the outside and they're born a little bit different, they take out of their civilization. So essentially they kill off the elements that show these variations that keep their society very pure and keep their gene pool, very restricted. So when her sister is born, she's basically told that either your daughter gets killed or you do something about it. So she leaves the tunnels, and we pick up the story about 8 years later, and it's her trying to survive with an underground society that wants her dead and people on the outside that are as varied and wild as you'd expect in a dystopian society.
And what were the things that influenced you to write this type of story with the Tunnel trilogy?
Well, it's very, it's a little bit environmental, and it's a little bit reflective of the things I was thinking about at the time. So when I was coming up with the idea for the book, I was running home from work day on day, and it was the middle of summer, and summers in Australia are brutal. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it would be 35 degrees Celsius or higher. I don't know, probably 90 something in Fahrenheit, and you'd get home at the end of a run and you'd be feeling wrecked from the heat and it just got me thinking that it seems to be getting hotter every summer, and the air seems to be getting, that little bit more polluted when you're running next to cars, and you kind of, there was one day when I was running home and there was a dead possum on the sidewalk, which happens here, and it was basically, cooking in the sun on the cement. And I just got this idea of what if it got so bad that you couldn't live outside anymore, that it was, this plus another 10 degrees plus, things falling apart. And it just got me thinking down that rabbit hole of where would we be in, 200, 300 years. And that's the crazy idea I came up with.
You've been featured in some actually pretty well-known anthologies, if you want to chronicles anthologies. You've been featured in the Future Chronicles, and you've also been featured in Daniel Arthur Smith's Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. How did you get introduced to Samuel Peralta and get invited into the Future Chronicles?
I started out as a reader of the Chronicles when the first couple came out. So Robot Chronicles and Alien Chronicles, it had a bunch of authors in it that at the time I really admired. So I think Hugh Howey was in the first couple and lots of big name authors. So I started out just as a fan. I worked my way in there, and I was in a couple of other anthologies with Lucas Bale and Alex Roddy as the editors. So I was in Crime and Punishment, No Way Home. I didn't think, really, in my mind at that time, I didn't think that I could get into Chronicles, so I didn't really worry about it. But then a bunch of the authors that I'd been writing with started to get invitations to work in the Chronicles, so I tried to get a bit more involved, get to know some of the people involved, and then out of the blue, Sam sent me a message and asked if I wanted to be in the Doomsday Chronicles, and it was pretty exciting.
And then how did you get invited to into Daniel Arthur Smith's Tales from the Canyons of the Damned?
I knew a few of the guys from around the traps, and essentially I just asked. I said, Daniel, do you mind if if I send you a story for consideration? He said, sure, why not? So I sent him a story that I'd been sitting on for a while, and thankfully Daniel loved it and put it in the book about a week later. I think it was very, very quick and very exciting.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And your most recent release is Young Slasher. For those that might not know what it is, why don't you give them the book blurb on what Young Slasher is about? So
Young Slasher is about a young woman, so 17-year-old schoolgirl in Australia again. And she's a bit of an outsider at her school in that she goes to a very high-profile private school, but she's in there on a scholarship, and she's had this rough upbringing from a broken family with substance abuse problems and all sorts of things. And she kind of gets mercilessly bullied by some of the other people in the book for not fitting into the environment and being quite different. So being, the punk-loving, scrappy little girl in a world of people who are sons and daughters of businessmen and real estate agents and that sort of thing. And she has, I'm not going to give anything away, but there's a terrible event in her life where she just kind of tweaks and goes, you know what, I'm not going to be the victim here. I'm going to be the bad guy. And she decides to take all of the horror movies, the slasher movies that she's been watching, and fashions herself as a slasher movie villain and sets about a path of a bloody path of vengeance and justice.
Who did the cover for Young Slasher? Because it's a pretty cool looking cover.
So that was Mr. Adam Hall.
Oh, okay.
So he does. He started doing the covers for a lot of the Future Chronicles books.
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of taken that mantle off of Jason Gurley now that Jason Gurley's career is blowing up. And
yeah.
I sent him an idea. I said, this is kind of what I want in my mind. I had all these influences from horror movie posters. So slasher movies are very, very kind of dark and brooding and black. And he sent me a couple of ideas that weren't quite working. And then one day out of the blue, he said, you know what, this is something the exact opposite of everything you've told me, but I like it and I think it works. He sent it back to me and I said, you know what, you're right. And that's how we ended up with it. So it's nothing to do with my own creativity. It's entirely Adam's. He just went against the grain and it works, I think.
Yeah, I think it does too. So where did your idea for this story come from?
Good question. I think it just comes from horror movies themselves. So I'm a big fan of horror movies, especially slasher movies. And there's quite a bit of horror comedy as well at the moment, and playing with ideas. I guess it all started with Scream, where they took every element that of slasher movies and made fun of it. And then there's other ones where they take it a bit further. And it's just that idea of these are the rules of the genre. And now that everyone knows the rules, you can't follow the rules anymore. You have to either make fun of the rules or take the rules to such a extreme extent that you're beyond the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, I don't know, a fun idea. Inspired from some comics that I've read as well. It's just Kick-Ass, where it's it's a superhero in real life thing. And there's a discussion right at the start of the book where she's talking to her friend Casey, and he says, why isn't there a slasher movie villain in real life? And so she's like, well, there is. It's been done in movies. There's a slasher in real life. And his idea is like, no, that's not real life. That's still fiction. It's like a fictional take of a world where slasher movies exist in real life. And so they take it one step further, where it's, why not be a slasher villain in real life? And it's just this kind of weird metafictional play on I guess everything.
Gotcha. If someone was to go onto your computer where you do your writing and look at your internet history from when you write your stories, what's some of the craziest things they might find you've had to research for a book?
A friend of mine recently designed a shirt on a website called Red Bubble, and I'm pretty sure he designed it entirely for me. I'm not a serial killer. It says on the top, and then there's a skull and a couple of meat cleavers, and down the bottom it says, despite what my Google search history would lead you to believe. Mine's very much the same. I'm sure I'm on a government watch list somewhere. I've searched. You go down a rabbit hole. I write early in the morning, and you have these ideas, and you're like, "Hang on, is that? Could you really stab someone through their skull?" And then you have to Google it. Or I think probably the worst thing I've had to Google is whether I had a character in my second book that has a hand cut off. And I was thinking, when you get a limb amputated, does the color of the skin change? Like, do you lose that kind of tan peachiness? Does it become white as the blood drains, or does it still look like a normal hand? So I had to Google it, and I got my answer from Google Images. It was yeah. I don't recommend you Google it if you don't want to look at real photos of amputated limbs. And that's why I'm on a watch list. One of the many reasons.
And that's why you got stopped in the airport every time you come over here.
Yeah. I'd say I'll probably get stopped at the airport just for the beard alone. But if I look at my Google search history, then it's, Katana Bay.
Well, speaking of your beard, Ernie Lewis wants to know, how long did it take to grow your fantastic beard?
Ernie. That's a tough question because I've had it for a while now. When I was 17, went on a 2-week holiday to New Zealand, and I thought, you know what, I'm an adult now. I can grow a beard. So I decided not to shave for those 2 weeks to see, what would happen. And it was terrible. It was this little bum plus goatee thing that was going on. And I thought I'd test it out towards the end. So I had a restaurant. I thought, you know what, I've got a beard. I'm 17. Drinking age is 18 down here. So I thought I'd try and order a beer with it. So, I'll have a Tooheys. And the girl just looks at me and she's like, "Can I see ID?" "Oh, you know what? I'll just have a Diet Coke, please." so at that point, I realized I wasn't quite there in the beardliness stakes. I went back to square one, and I didn't try it again for probably at least another 5 years. And when I did, something must have happened in my body because I could grow a beard again, and I'd finally made it. So I've been rocking a beard off and on for probably the best part of the last 5 or 6 years.
And now that you don't get carded, it's okay.
Yeah, now I don't get carded, but if I was to shave it, I probably would.
Probably would.
I tell people
you're not old enough.
Me having a beard is the difference. So I'm 30, dead on 30. If I have a beard, people think I'm 40 or something. If I shave it, people think I'm 16 again. So it's kind of necessary to keep the that level of adultship.
I guess that means you could you could write under a pen name and then just shave your beard for the author photo, and they'd have no idea who you are. Enter,
young writing competition.
That's right. High school competition.
I've seen his photo.
That is hilarious. Deanne Carlton, she wants me to ask you about your dreams, the ones you have when you're asleep, and also about any aspirations you might have.
Oh, dreams. Dreams are an interesting topic. Very horror movie. I have a lot of crazy dreams, and I don't really know why. I'm a bit of a light sleeper, so I think that's part of it. Like, your brain is always a little bit switched on. And so I just wake up some mornings and think, what the hell have I been doing to have a dream like that? Mm-hmm. Like, I worry about the psychology of myself when I'm asleep. You're lucky I'm not a sleepwalker because some weird stuff can happen.
That's fun.
Yeah, so I try and put them out of my mind as quickly as possible.
That's funny.
Yeah.
How about dreams or your aspirations? I guess for your writing career, what kind of dreams do you have about that?
It's hard to say. I tend to just go with the flow of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not one of those people that plans out a series of 10 books in advance and then hits every point that they wanted to hit from the start. I'm more driven by inspiration, and that changes from month to month. So when I find an idea that really excites me, that's when I sit down and I crunch it out. But it also means that sometimes I write a book and people want a sequel, and I can't write a sequel because it's just not what excites me at that point in time.
Yeah, I saw someone asked you on Goodreads. I want to say it might have been for your book, The Pearl Diver.
Yeah,
they were wanting to know if there was going to be a book 2, and you said that you had actually started it twice, but none of them actually excited you, and so you didn't want to write a story that didn't excite you. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's a book that needs a sequel. There are a lot of people have asked me, when's the sequel coming? And the only answer I have is I don't know. It's tricky. I guess it's one of the downsides of the way I do things. But,
right.
But I've tried it before. If you sit down and you write chapter after chapter of something that you're not 100% into, then you just get to a point where I could finish this book, but it wouldn't be the book that I want to write, and it wouldn't be the book that people want to read. So in order to, really do justice to the novel, you just have to put it on the shelf until the time is right, essentially.
Gotcha. So do you, when you get a book idea, do you plan the story out, or do you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and write what comes to your head?
I'm not a meticulous plotter, but I like to know, I call them beats, so I like to know where the key, rhythmic beats in the story are going to happen. So I like to know what's happening at the start, what's happening a quarter into the novel, what's happening at the halfway point, what's happening at the 3/4 mark, and then what's happening at the end. So I kind of know all the destinations along the journey, but mm-hmm. I like to leave the route between those destinations up to my creativity at the time, because I find if I try and plan it in perfect detail, my mind won't go that place anyway. It'll go, you know what, this is a better idea, you should do this, and I end up taking some other trail.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's a bit like a holiday. If you were to plan to go from Virginia across to San Antonio in Texas, and you planned, every stop you were going to stay at every night, I mm-hmm. couldn't do that. I could plan a couple of places I wanted to see along the way, and then I would just meander between those places on whatever little off-beaten path place that I find.
Let's see what else you can find. Yeah. And then the one book we hadn't touched on that I don't want to upset any of your listeners is The Pearl Diver. You're known for that one as well. Why don't you give kind of the, book blurb on what that one is about?
Yeah, so Pearl Diver is sort of my take on young dystopian science fiction. And it's an interesting one. So it's about a young woman who lives on a planet in a universe where there's 7 or 6 inhabited planets, with rumors of a 7th, and each of the populations, they have a lot in common. So there's sort of the idea that perhaps they were once all related, that they've grown very adapted to the situation on her planet. So she lives on a planet that's 96% ocean and only small slithers of land. So it's a very water-based society. People there can breathe underwater for limited periods of time. And so they have a competition every year where they drop a single black pearl into a section of the ocean, and all of the students of that year who are about to finish their education compete to be the one that can find the single pearl in an area of ocean, with the idea that if they win, they get a path to the home planet of the system, which is sort of the bureaucratic government side. And so she sees this as an escape from the life that she doesn't quite like. And so quite aggressively goes after being the pearl diver, being the winner of that competition.
And what inspired you to write that story?
I wanted to write something quite different to everything I'd been writing up to at that point. So I'd been writing, a lot of the whole, post-apocalyptic tunnel trilogy, and it's quite restrictive in that, you've got this really survival-based, instinct-based thing. So I wanted to just come up with this big, beautiful universe where everything's different. You can essentially invent a whole society or whole, numbers of society from scratch and play around with a lot more elements and break out into space. And really, creativity-wise, I could just expand myself and do whatever I wanted. So that was kind of the idea. And I started writing it when I was on a writer's retreat to an island down here called Stradbroke Island. And it's just these big, beautiful blue oceans and rolling waves. And I used that as the inspiration for this is going to be a planet of oceans. And kind of all of those scents and the smells of the ocean and the taste of the salt. And I used all of that to just dive on in, to use a cliche term. And once I got the ball rolling, it didn't stop until I'd finished the book.
Well, there you go. And you said you've been over here to America a few times. What's some of your favorite things to do when you come over here and visit?
Well, I'm a big baseball fan. So on my first trip over there, so I'm a fan of the Houston Astros, which is interesting. So my first trip over there, we went to Houston and we went to 3 games in a row. So we went to a whole weekend stand of baseball, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday, sat in a different part of the stadium each time. And to me, that was heaven on earth. It was brilliant. And so that was fun. And what was it? Second time I went there, we went to Kentucky, which is, I thought, a beautiful state. And we visited all of the bourbon distilleries in and around Lexington. And I thought that was really interesting as well to, see the countryside. A lot of these places are on really beautiful pieces of land. You kind of learn about the whole history of the industry and the culture and all of these little elements that most people don't think about when they sit down and, have a quiet drink at the end of a busy week.
Yeah. Well, next time you come over and you go to Houston, you need to try to get a picture of you and Evan Gaddis. So that way the 2 epic beards in one picture. Unless he shaved it. I don't know if he did or not.
He's still got it. He still got it. I remember actually, when I was waking up, so I woke up at 7, this interview, my time is at 8. Mm-hmm. One of the good things about the time difference is that I can wake up and I can throw on a baseball game and it'll be live because it's, evening over there, afternoon.
Right.
So I was watching the Astros play the Rangers minutes before you called.
That's funny.
Gaddis still has the beard.
Nice.
You got a hit.
They with the time difference, I would try to watch Aussie Rules football if I could, but it was like it came on at something like 3:00 in the morning here.
Yep.
So I'd have to watch replays of it. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard it. If you haven't, I'll have to find the link and send it to you. But when Evan Gaddis played for the Atlanta Braves, they actually created kind of the legend of El Oso Blanco, which is what they called him.
They still call him that,
yeah. Have you heard that where it's was it he doesn't turn on the shower cries every time he comes in, and It's just,
Oh dear.
it's like trees fall over just to be his baseball bat. And it's just, I'll have to send you the link and I'll put it in the show notes. It's pretty funny. Well, here at the Legendarium, we like to end each episode on what we call the legendary ending. So these are just some kind of just random questions. So, just whatever. The first one is, what songs are currently on your writing playlist?
I'm actually listening to a lot of, I call it backpacker, but like indie hip hop at the moment, because it kind of ties into the book that I'm writing. And there's a song called Don't Speak by DJ Shadow featuring Run the Jewels. And it is the best song. So that's my number one playlist song at the moment.
What genre of book is this one going to be?
So this is a horror novel as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's the I'm calling it a pseudo sequel to Young Slasher.
Oh, okay.
Heard it here first.
If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse with one of the characters that you've created, who would you want to be stuck in a zombie apocalypse with?
This one's easy. So Jade from Irradiated, 100%.
Okay.
Knows how to handle herself. Because she's not in a zombie apocalypse, but she's in a world where pretty much everyone wants to kill her, and she's still alive. So I think that I'll take those odds.
There you go. Now, if you could pick any character from any media source, movies, books, comics, whichever, to be stuck in a zombie apocalypse with, who would you pick?
That's tricky. I'd have to say probably Rick from The Walking Dead.
Okay. Why him?
In that, if you're with him, well, he'll do anything he can to keep you alive if you're on his good side. So I would get on his good side and I would stay there and we would ride this thing out.
There we go. So let's say our listeners are going to end up being stranded somewhere and they can only have 2 books with them. And one of them is one of your books. Which one book would you give to them to be stranded with?
I'd give them Young Slasher, I think.
You think?
I was gonna say the Pearl Diver because if you're stranded on an island, it would be thematically appropriate. But they probably want to get away from, like, you'd get pretty bored of the ocean after a little while as a deserted island. So I'll give them Young Slasher, something completely different. And they're probably going to be quite angry stranded on an island. So this will give an outlet for all that angst.
There you go. And what other book would you give them besides one of yours?
One of my favorite novels is a Kurt Vonnegut Jr. novel called The Sirens of Titan. Mm-hmm. And it's quite rereadable and introspective. So if you're on an island, you want a book that you can read over and over again and think about from different angles, and that would be that book for me. And that you can read it the first time and just see it as a science fiction kind of a silly novel, but then you read it again and you start to think about all the different themes that he plays with and all the different ideas. And I think it's a good book to read and reread if you've got a lot of time to just sit around and ponder the meaning of life, the universe, and everything.
If you had a time machine, when and where would you travel?
I'd go to the future. The past is the past. there's not a bunch of rosy times in the past. So I would get in there, add, 100 years, just keep it in my hometown and just see what the hell happened. And if I was right.
Sounds good. If you had one superpower that you could have, which one would you want and why?
Immortality would be nice.
There you go. Then you wouldn't need a time machine.
Then I wouldn't need to worry about stuff. Yeah.
That's right. And then for the question that we're most famous for, a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say and why is he here?
He'd be very lost if he was here. I guess I'd ask him if he's from the South Pole or Mexico, and he'd probably tell me not to stereotype.
And before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
For writing, I'd just say trust your gut. Don't try and copy other writers, because then all you'll be is a copy of other writers. So do your thing. People, not everyone will appreciate your weird and wonderful mind all of the time, but the people that do will really enjoy it and really see something there, and that's how you start to make a name for yourself by being yourself. And for life, I don't know. Just enjoy it. See the world, I think, is probably the biggest thing.
Sounds good. Where can our listeners go if they want to find out more about you or your books that you've written?
Honestly, go to Amazon, type in S. Elliot Brandis, and that's probably as good a place as any. And if you're on the web, look up my mailing list. So there should be a link on Amazon as well. Join the mailing list, and you'll probably hear about news and books and have copies of books before anybody else.
Sounds good. We'll put links to those in the show notes over at legendarium.com, so they can head on over there, get signed up for your newsletter, and check out all the stories that you've written.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you getting up a little early to record this interview with us.
My pleasure.
Well, guys, that's all the time we've got for this episode. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to it. So what baseball team did S. Elliot Brandis see when he was here in America? Did you catch the answer? If so, head on over to legendarium.com, leighngendarium.com. Click on this episode and head to the show notes. Leave a comment with your answer, and you have a chance to win. Good luck, everybody. Until next time, have a good one, and remember to always be legendary. Oh, screwed that one up. Blooper reel.